discuss about the employee relations versus industry relations, what is employee relations and what is industry relations. Over the past few decades, there has been confusion between the two terms, which is the concept of employee relations and industry relations. What is employee relations? Employee relations is a term revolves around a smaller subset of industries and goes beyond the collectives such as trade unions. Employee relations are no longer focused on factory work, manufacturing jobs, but now also includes the service sector, the non-union entities, part-time and contractual workers. It is because employee relations is a way to create balance between employers and employees by creating an environmental conducive to each needs. Examples of employee relations: number 1, the workplace conflicts; number 2, the workplace bullying; number 3, workplace safety; number 4, are issues; number 5, pay raise request. These are the examples of employee relations. How can you handle those employee relations issues? Number 1, you must listen. Number 2, you must give your full attention. Number 3, you focus on what is being said both vocally and physically. Number 4, educate and communicate. And lastly, document everything. What is industry relations? The term is synonymous and associated with collectives such as mass movements of workers, trade unions, and others. Industry relations were thought of to be more focused on collective actions such as bargaining agreements. It was also linked to industrial work such as the manufacturing sector, labor-intensive tasks, and factory work that are full-time. Examples of industry relations: number 1, the union organizing; number 2, the collective bargaining; number 3, strikes. These three are the prime examples of industry relations at work because they are the three actions that involve active participations of both organized labor and management. Is generally referred to as labor relations or labor management relations.
Psychological contract and why it matters. What is psychological contract? Psychological contract refers to the often unspoken set of expectations and assumptions that two parties have of each other about things like how they will behave and act. So when I say psychological contract, it's a mutual set of expectations. Why? Because it's an unwritten contract. It's more of a notion. It's more of a concept. It can be quite hard to measure and define because it's also very dependent on the individual. The contract differs from individual to individual. It also differs from organization to organization. Psychological contract also a relationship between an employer and an employee where there is unwritten mutual expectations for each side. So here are the practices that are accepted and expected in the relationship between the employee and the employers. First, we have both parties observe fairness and transparency. Second, employee impact and value are recognized and rewarded by their employer in various forms such as benefits, tenure, or career growth. Lastly, both employer and employee will work toward the shared goal of growth that will be beneficial for both parties based on shared values, morals, and vision. The employees themselves seek specific conditions that will further elevate their sense of belongingness and self-actualization. So, here are the following. First, the community building among peers. Second, tenure and security. Third, corporate mobility and promotions. Fourth, expansion of skill sets and training. Fifth, humane treatment. 7. Work or life balance or integration. 8. Having their voices and suggestions heard by the management. 9. Impact and performance are duly rewarded. And lastly, flexibility on task and process. In order for the employee conditions work flawlessly, the industry also sets its standards on its employees. First, employees should be proactive and willing to learn. Second, has the necessary skills and competence to work or designated task. Third, a team player willing to work with others. Fourth, focused on achieving the goals set by the organization. And lastly, has the initiative to work on tasks with minimal supervision. So what happens if the psychological contract is broken? So it can lead to an employee becoming disengaged with their job and, if not resolved, can continue to cause disaffection and demotivation that further results in a decline in performance. Importance of psychological contract. Psychological contract is important because it allows the employee to see their values and role within the business, and it also helps both sides avoid creating unrealistic expectations of one another.
Relationship, attachment, compliance, and commitment. According to Zioni, compliance, the word itself conjures ideas of submission and power. In the relationship between employee and employer, compliance has different forms and root sources of power present in this interaction. So, compliance talks about the following the relevant laws and regulations in a certain industry. Zioni classifies organization, the sources of power, and the forms of involvement. Sources of power, coercive, punishment. Coercive talks about uses physical force and fear to control the subordinates. Example, crime gangs or prisons. Second, remunerative, financial reward. Most business firms emphasize such intrinsic reward. These rewards include salary, merit pay, working condition, and job security. And last is normative, symbolic awards tied to values held by the company. This kind of organization, the members share commitment to the beliefs and values of the organization, identification with goals, and making a contribution to society. Example of normatives are hospitals, churches, professional association. Forms of involvement. First is alienative, negative or antagonistic, which means that the power subject disagrees with the power holder and submits against his will. Alienative, usually out of fear, which in case they do not support the organization goals. Second, calculative, careful and thoughtful of choices, in which the subject choice to comply either in expectation of a reward or to avoid sanctions. So, they are moderately supportive in a certain industry. And last is moral, positive, and in accordance with norms set by the company, which means they strongly support the organization with the result of agreement based on social norms of a value system.
What is commitment? According to Itzioni, commitment is about involvement of moral bond between employer and employee and sharing an optimistic view that leads to mutually beneficial relationship. In the 90s, commitment is defined as a belief leading to employees creating positive value and even beyond the expected output. So on both definition, commitment is assumed as a bond between employees and employers and a behavior that can be described and differentiated from the others. There are two forms of commitment. Number one is the attitudinal commitment. It distinguishes with the psychological bond of the employer and the employee that is held by common norms and values. Ang attitudinal commitment kay define siya og three dimension, which is the positive effect for the organization, identification with the organization, and the willingness to exert effort on behalf of the organization. Number two forms of commitment is the behavioral commitment. Commitment that can be described as going beyond expectation or loyalty to the company. For example, behavioral commitment can be as simple as signing job offer, as it can make someone feel committed to their work.
Good day everyone. Under employee and industry relations, we will tackle about the two sides of the coin, cooperation and conflicts. Cooperation and conflict exist and are a part of this ongoing and never-ending interaction. Conflicts and cooperation are more akin to push and pulls of the system, unlike your laws of physics. Minutes variation of action contribute to the reaction of the variables in the system. So, as what I have written in the book, that cooperation and conflicts exist. Di na yun na siya mawa sa usa ka certain organization. So, conflict and cooperation kay mura siya push and pull system nga pwede nga makapa-down or makapa-improve sa usa ka organization or usa ka community. Central to this relationship is the idea of perspective the different actors have. One view on a topic cannot be assumed to be universal unless it is agreed by both parties or written as a doctrine or universal law. Therefore, it should be clarified that perspective is not the view per se, but is the way or approach to view a certain idea, context, or worldview. Each person has certain view or basis of their perspective. Fox, 1966, identified that this frame of references has three different frames, and these are unitarist, pluralist, and radical or Marxist. Unitarist, as the term suggested, it is a view that assumes the companies and their employees are like-minded and thus share various commonalities, such as norms and aspirations. This is best described as both paternalistic and at the same breath controlling. Example of this are idea of family or pushing for communal spirit across the organization. In this view, conflict should be avoided at all costs and is seen as distraction in the workplace. So, inani guys is murag ang unitarist from the word unitarism, unity. Murag dapat one vision, one goal silang tanan, then nag-avoid sila og any conflict sa ilang organization. So for me, basic example siguro ani kanang mga religious group nga kanang one goal, one idea, one ilang gi-focus lagi kanang maglikay sila og any conflict. Pluralism. The difference between unitarism and pluralism is that pluralism looks into the diversity of individual and acknowledges it. Therefore, it accepts the notion that there are differences in objectives, norms, and perspective, which then create groups of union. The groups then create their networks and power structured. It may or may not overlap in their goals and preferences, leading to conflicts. An example of this is varying function of departments that may be conflict to the motives of the other. Another example of conflicts that may arise may be on the bounds of jobs, rules, and processes that may differ from group to group. For pluralists, these kinds of conflicts are welcome and anticipated, and commitment of the workers. Managers in this perspective are not be all and end all of leadership, but shared structure of power with their subjects of employees. So, ani guys, ang pluralism is dili lang siya focus sa usa ka goal. So ila pong gi-acknowledge ang idea or kanang gitawag na to o kanang motive sa uban, then gihimo nila og usa naghimo sila og usa ka kining kanang structures of groups para sa usa ka certain company para ma-avoid ang conflicts. O niya ang kuan ni ang managers kay kuan siya not the be all and end all of leadership. So open siya sa tanan sa structure sa iyang company. Radical or Marxist. Class and exploitation of workers are the central notions behind the radical or Marxist perspective. In much simpler sense, the employer is seen as the evil that merely exploits workers for labor to drive surplus value, which is only accessible to the capitalist and not the laborers themselves. This alienation from work is driving force from Marxist through the fuels class division and exploitation. Labor plus technology plus capital equals good service with surplus value. Throwing this belief down to society at large, the same class conflict exists within organizations, all because Marxists see that the system is unjust and only reinforce the machine of the rich to accumulate more. In conclusion, this employer relation is merely one-sided and exploitative, which is impossible to resolve unlike the unitarists and pluralists. Conflicts in this sense is unavoidable and resolution through meditation is impossible, all because Marxists see compromise and collective bargaining agreement as a surrender to capitalist machine. Therefore, only reinforces the cycle than break it. The radicals or Marxists only see revolution as escape and final solution to break the cycle of the exploitation and end the practice once and for all in class war against the capitalists. So, ano kani siya guys, kani nga kining kanang gitawag ani niyang reference kay gubot kini siya kay dahog o mura siya o isa lang ang masunod sa ilang kuan, ilang kanang organization kanang murag kung kinsa to ang capitalist moray kanang murag masunod. So ang mga laborer niya or iyang mga employee is dili na maka kuan murag walay power to speak about sa ilang mga kuan, ilang ideas. So murag dili sila ma-acknowledge niya kanang sa mga Marxist kay ilang murag revolution na lang ang paagi para makagawas, maka-escape sila nga kuan ani nga ma-exploitation. Murag mo ilang solution na lang ang revolution para maka-escape.
Industrial relation as a system. Today we are going to look at one of the early theories of industrial relation. Mr. John Thomas Dunlop, a labor economist and a former United States Secretary of Labor, back in the late 1950. Dunlop suggests that the framework for industrial relation is built on the interrelationship of institution and behavior. The development of the system theory, according to Dunlop, the industrial relation system at any one time comprised of actors, certain contexts, or environmental factors, and lastly, ideologies, that being the system together and the web of role created to govern the actors of work. We will explore this. Dunlop proposed three main actors within the industrial relationship system: the management, labor, union, and the government, to create a set of roles in a workplace. Dunlop believed that all these actors have a common set of beliefs, and this is what entails the system together. However, few persons have criticized the view, stating that views and beliefs will vary among the actors. That's why conflict exists in the industrial relation system. In fact, everyone is motivated differently, which can be ultimately affect the relationship within the workplace. Environmental factors that are significant of the systems are determined by the society and can be influenced by other subsystems. In other words, the industrial relation system can be impacted by technology, market force, political power, is distributed within the society. The web of rules tell us about the employment relationship in other workplace and exists to the govern that relationship. This can be substantive rules within addressed issues such as wages, hours of work, and other terms and conditions of employment, and procedural rules which can pretend the discipline, setting of disputes, and redundancy. Remember, Dunlop system theory is about the structures and development of relationship among the three key members of labor relation: the labor, management, government, and about resolving labor management problem based upon the agreement on a common set of beliefs and providing the rules necessarily to maintain the relationship despite impact from other forces that are beyond the part controls of IR system.